Good morning. How are you doing, Mr. Lion? How was your weekend? Oh, sorry, I got distracted by I don't know if you saw any of it, but last week, Thieneke, um, and I went back and forth a little bit over some advice. We'll go there, not targeting. And so sadly, the advice is generally strongly tied to one particular person, which I think is more my issue with it. And it was quite a discussion in the end. Some fair points raised, different perspectives, but useful nonetheless. I've been doing really great on the light recently. Like it, I don't need to turn my light source on, which is good. I don't get blinded. Anyway, random. Hmm. So, as mentioned, today is stream 199 of Liquid Sky rather than stream 30 of 31 of developers.stream. This is deliberate, but we'll make up for that. So, over the weekend, I haven't done very much that I would normally do. I just, those weekends where you just don't, you're not productive. I don't know if you have those weekends, but like, where I just, to get my brain back on the coding exercise. I've been playing games all weekend. I got on Gran Turismo and in VR. I was playing that, which is just amazing. Um, and I played yesterday. I actually played about 3 or 4 hours of Claire Obscure Expedition 33, which is a so far a really good RPG. So yes, I spent my afternoon doing that yesterday. But anyway, back to coding today. We're going to pick up where I left off last week with team assignments. So last week we were changing assign users to teams. So when you um, the idea being that on the UI you will be able to select the list of teams that the user is assigned to, and that will post to here, and that will assign the user to those teams. The more I think about it, the more I think about the language being correct. It feels correct. It's funny. Over the weekend, I'm going to divert a little bit here. Over the weekend, I read an article by. Oh no, so I read an article by him, but I also saw a post from Milan on not aligning your code to the principles of clean architecture, which is what this does, right? But then I'm taken back to I get why. Going on the topic of strong advice, right? I get why. Um, the problem is you're focused. Harris, thank you very much for the follow. Appreciate it. Um, hello. Um, going back to the advice I was talking about to begin with. Um, the whole your code is not. It is a bunch of technical things. However, it should be describing the process, the business as you go through. But then when you look at large examples, they do exactly what this is doing. So I'm not panicked by that advice. It does not bother me that the code is aligned this way. It means that I get some clean separation, and I can mentally separate where things lie. But anyway, that's another diversion. So when the user teams updated event is triggered, this publishes a user team assignments integration event. And I was considering this, and I'm starting to think more about the idempotency of messages, which is the stream title, right? The problem of, have I seen this message before? Do I need to do something with this message? Is important. If I publish, the user is assigned to team A. Actually, let me do the old chart thing. Scratch, new drawing. If I have a timeline and I say user team A, and then I say down here team A, team B, and then I say team C, right? I want the current state in my database, right? No, that. Wow, we're in trouble today. Hi Nest, how you doing? I win. Right. I want the current state in my DB to say that I'm on team C. Right. If, however, I will be the A team too. If, however, this event gets replayed for whatever reason, right? So it gets replayed. If I don't check for whether I should update this in some way, shape, or form, then I'm going to make that say team A and B. And that's the thing I'm trying to figure out how I want to do this right now. Now, the simple fact is I do attach a last updated. You just do locking, whatever. Well, the problem is a distributed system, right? So from the client, I associate team A. That goes to organization management. It publishes the integration event. The view gets the event. Now I'm using Kafka, so the order of events is pretty much guaranteed. So it takes some of the stress away, right? It takes some of the stress away. I now publish team B, integration event fires, team B. I now publish team C, and that's team C. Now, for whatever reason, we reset the offsets. No. So we reset the offsets of Kafka for whatever reason. The system resets, something goes weird. We lose that. It replays the events. Now, the likelihood is if I replay the event from over here, then I'm intending to, if I requeue the event from over here, I actually do intend to republish that event, in which case, you know, then it's going to have a new date. That's a flaw. But this will publish if we reset the offsets of the queues, or the topics, sorry, it'll republish. So that event replays. So now team AB republishes, and it's got the time from earlier on. We shouldn't take that message, so we need to know that we shouldn't take that message. The easiest way to do it is via date. All right. Have I seen a message newer than this one? These do carry a date, occurred on date. So if the occurred on is less than your let's look up. I'm looking at the definition just to make sure that we are so that I know that I'm not disagreeing for the sake of disagreeing. Changes only validated for conflicts when user attempts to commit their updates, which helps. I mean, it's not locking the record. It's saying, should I update this record based upon a value? Well, well, changes are validated for conflicts when I tried to save it. Okay, yeah, fair enough. I wouldn't refer to it as optimistic locking, but yeah. If the version changes in DB, then it doesn't go through. The version that the update, that's the literal definition of optimistic locking. Fair enough. No, I'm good. I can look it up. Thank you. I've never seen it referred to in that way when it comes to this, but fair enough. Yeah. Thank you. So, either way, whether we call it optimistic locking or not. So, for reference, Nest, by the way, I am not academic in my way. I've been a programmer for over 25 years. But I did not go to school for this. So so when we get to that sort of stuff, I'm happy to learn how to associate it with actual techniques, but a lot of things I just know to do. And I have not had anyone refer to it as optimistic locking before. So yeah. It's just featuring. Right. A database technology. Yeah. So I haven't associated that way. Yes. Anyway, appreciate the education. Um, so by the way, um, so shall we include a version column? Okay. So I'm publishing this as a user identifier. Actually, that does need to be more explicit. Oh, no, it doesn't, because it's user team assignments, user teams. Um, and this does have an occurred on date. The problem is the only real good way of storing this on the other side is as a collection. So what am I going to use for the idempotency? A date doesn't really work unless I track a date at another level against the user. Like, when did you last see team assignments? I can't use the last updated date of the user, because then I could potentially update the teams and then get an event for the user that is now older than that, and it ignores a user update. So a version doesn't help me. You can associate the version with a list of rows. You can associate the version with a list of rows. How do I associate a version with a list of rows? When you fetch the list of rows to the client, you get a version for that list. You then pass that version back with your new list to say, I want. Bearing in mind these are in different databases. So you would store a version external. Ugh. I mean, at that point, I might as well just store the teams last updated on. So I being associated with a version plus an ID, and each row would point back to that ID to refer to that list ID. So right now we have users with teams. What the heck? Okay. So if anything updates the rows, like adds a team, it'll throw a conflict if anything else tries to add a team. Team and team being parallel, 2 requests, 1 more conflict. So my go-to here would be to do use teams, right? Where this is an ID for this, combined with an ID for this, right? So I could store the date on there, and then when I get an event, I look at what I've got and remove anything that doesn't match. Messy. Storing the teams last updated on the user. Not very appealing, but an option. The way this will work, by the way, is because teams might not actually have arrived yet, so it will create the reference to store version on user teams. So in each row, store the last updated, and then get all records older than. If I create a new table, I have to get all the rows or pass back all the rows. You can do an add or remove with an ID. That ID will refer to the list of rows in a specific state. Trying to visualize what you're trying to describe. You're saying version. But the version isn't going to matter. Why the version would be just an incremented value, but I need to care about the date. I need to care, have I seen this message before? Right? So where's the version going to, what does the version really do me there? Best practice for a value that, but I don't know what, if I get another message, If I get another message, well, so optimistic locking, again, coming back to the database, is I have a version of that record. I come in to do an update, right? In this case, I have a distributed message. The message is coming from another source. I have an ID and a list of teams. I loop through for that user, find all the teams. What does a version mean to that message? Because if that message comes and it's a message that's previously been sent and it's old, I don't want to acknowledge that message. So version isn't going to help that row, is it? Version refers to the current state of the list of teams that is associated with the user. Right. Yeah, I realize that I've got to get all the data. I'm not debating that I have to get the data, but I have to be able to know that I should process this message, and a version is not going to give me that ability. How will a version do that? So the only way I do that, so to your point of the version, I'd have to publish the version. I'd have to own the version in the source and then check the version on the side. But I have to publish the version. Versions required for writes with optimistic locking. Understood. So my problem moves back to teams. Version of whatever you had originally, you don't need to update it or worry about it. It came from the original fetch. The reality is I don't. This is only sticky because I'm actually paying more attention to the idempotency nature of the messages, right? I'm dealing with the fact that I may not have the message appearing that I think, and I'm just trying to be thorough here. I don't disagree with your version. It's not your version, the concept. Well, client client in this case, each system has to deal with those messages. Each system in the group has to deal with, do I care about, well, have I seen this data before? Right? Um, in the case of the transforms and changes, it literally looks at the dates and times of the events to say, yeah, this is older than anything I've got. So it's already dealing with that sort of stuff. Right? It knows that it could get a message out of sequence. It knows that it could get, um, you know, B before A, but it calculates the differences based upon um, the one it processes. So if you send a bunch of updates, it'll stream in, but if it got them out of sequence, it wouldn't hurt it because it'd ignore the ones that are, it'd calculate it off the latest. So, well, they do, but they don't. They'll deal with the state. So the idea of this is it's more, it can replay events and figure things out again. It knows what, it just needs the current state. The view aspect is the one I'm focused on right now, and tracking a version would probably be healthier than, so if I track the version at this level, when I get to here, my user teams just have that version ID on them. And like you say, if it's greater than, it's redundant because that version is, or I could store a user team version at the user level. Um, true. They both get the same way. My initial, the way I was going to do this before this conversation was to suck it up and put the teams updated on here. Um, well, I'm not using the last. No, I wasn't going to overload a column. I was going to add a second column, a third column for dates, I suppose. No, I'd already gone through the cognitive effort of, yeah. Well, version means that I have to change the publishing side as well to track that version. So I'm just trying to think through where do I put that? Although I will say that a from a clarity perspective, a version number does read a little easier. No. What I'm debating right now is, do I want to, because as I said, I'm trying to pay more attention to this stuff. So whatever I do here is a pattern. It is going forward, a modification I must make. Yeah, no. Well, so this is where the databases differ, right? So, Rambler Geek, good afternoon. In this event, if I go and remove the teams, all the teams, or delete the user, it will publish a empty object to Kafka. This will pick it up and remove it. It doesn't matter. I realize that then the event comes along afterwards and says, "Oh, by the way, you've got it." Um, but in that event, that event, yeah. What I'm contemplating is yeah. I'm not doing soft delete. No, unless I absolutely have to. I've seen how badly soft deletes backfire. Especially on the view level. If I get delete, I'm deleting that data. On the backside, soft delete maybe. On the sources of truth. On this, I do not want to implement soft delete. Unless that's an absolute necessity. But I get it. The event could be replayed. Hmm. Oh yes, I moved the data from live index to a Reaper index. The client only ever worked off live index, but the persistence worked off both. Yeah, that's the other risk, right? If you end up with that data sat in a state of, you then have to check, oh, should I see this data? Morning, Delta. Yeah. The problem I've always had with soft deletes is in terms of organizational problems, in that they don't like the idea of removing the data. So anything suggesting that we remove it. So I've kind of taken a more, no, it's gone approach to things. Oh, I get that. I appreciate the talk though. It's Um, um, it's not so much like right now. Obviously, I'm trying to think through this workflow, which pieces I need to change, which I see the point of the version. I appreciate the discussion. Um, I appreciate the chance to educate a little bit more. Now my brain's whirring on all the other stuff. Um, yeah. In a, um, what I'm contemplating, by the way, so I'm gonna share my thought here is: do I make this rather than having it as part of the event itself? Do I make it a standard part of the event? I.e., do I make it headers? In which case, a delete can still have a header. Um, a delete just has a null message. If I make it part of headers, I have some engineering to do, re-engineering to do of the Kafka pieces, because the Kafka pieces are my wrapper around them to try and aid in readability. Um, but if I'm going to introduce a version as a concept, um, that's pretty much the most flexible, because then I could always store the version on the other side and know that any version coming after it is clean it. Completely deleting data will be difficult anyways because of Kafka. Well, Nest is giving me the chance to think through some of these events now. And now I'm trying to limit the amount of work I do now while increasing the understanding and awareness that certain things are going to stick out there. Um, right now, I don't have to worry about events replaying. I'm not in a production environment. I'm not turning these things on or off. Data is not corrupting on me. Right? It's not something I'm going to see. And even if I do see it, it's going to be confusing. For the most part, right now, most of the handlers will just take the data they're given and update that data. So if an event comes out of sequence, i.e., it's replayed for whatever reason, um, it will take that version. Now, the hope would be if you're replaying those events anyway, it's going to update to the latest version. It's just going to go through some iterations in the meantime. But that would be bad for other things because you might react to those things. Well, you might push notifications. You might do all sorts of other things. I learned about an aggregator pattern. Nice. 100% there's no, there's, what I meant there is Kafka does, depending on my design of the topics, does give me some level of guarantee on ordering, but it doesn't guarantee that the order of those messages isn't going to come older. If I replay, if I restart, yeah, that's why I did. Um, no, well, in Kafka, you are guaranteed in the same partition for a topic. You are guaranteed that the events will come chronologically. You partition, you lose those guarantees. Obviously, I'm going to partition eventually, You are guaranteed, though, for the same identifier that it's going to get put in the same partition. So the same object would be. But I don't, that's not something I'm potentially, uh, you must be able to tell if there's an event missing, though, especially if there's an integer index. Um, no. Or again, order doesn't necessarily solve the problem because you could get something publishing another event. Yeah, it doesn't guarantee anything. It just gives you some. Mojo, good morning. Yes. Yeah, if you want high throughput, you can't have the ordering. But that's why Kafka is nice. You can partition the data and increment the number, increase the number of consumers to that data. Well, but that's where the idempotency, that's where the knowing that you should update comes in. If you get the events out of sequence, you have to know whether you need to care about it. So again, I deal with the fact that I might get something referring to some other data by stubbing out that data, right? I acquire the actual primary key of that data. So if I get a Teams notification, if I get a user Teams notification, and for some reason those teams aren't actually fully associated with the system yet, it will acquire the team ID so that it has the data integrity. And then later that event comes in, it will then update that record, right? So the data is valid, but it might be empty. That's how I handle those out of sequence things. If you get an account closed before you get an account created, you've got to understand how do you deal with that. And if you have a distributed system, then you don't really have guarantees that you're not going to get that account closed. You can try and lessen it. I'm not dealing with that one. I'm just saying, well, yeah, to that point, if you get an account closed, then anything else comes afterwards. So, but yeah, yeah. So what I'm debating right now is how and where to put some level of. So, okay, easy option number one. I add a user teams updated column to the user teams in the view, and that is a date. Now, when I get an event from this integration event, I check the occurred on of the event against the last updated, and if it's older, I just throw it out. So I haven't looked at that one. Or introduce the concept of a version and track a version, which would allow us to know that we're on the wrong version of this object easily without checking dates, and then store a team version ID on this record. The difference there would be I'd have to track the version. Right. The version does require me to change the other side, though, right now. That's all I'm debating, whether I'm thinking that's a good general pattern. Again, what I'm looking at here is not just this particular message. I'm looking at how do I apply this. Once I decide on what this is this a pattern? Where do I put it? What is my standard? Um, Basically, data can exist in pairs, and you cannot easily update the pairing. Time ordered data, for example, is high in connascent, however that's spelled. Gotcha. Well, I get where that was coming from. A bit more. Looking it up though. I'm trying to find the word you mean. Con. Coupling versus connaissance. Gotcha. Optimistic locking. I'm debating this from a. I'm debating it from the wrong direction. I'm debating it from the least amount of effort right this second to get the desired solution, which is not the right way to think about it. But I'm offsetting it against the readability. So if I was to store So I don't have a parent record here, which is why this is done the way it is. Right? I just create this set of child records, updating the version of the user, the consider it, I mean, ultimately I'm doing a is it greater than what is there? Right? If the date or the version is greater than the one that's there, ignore it, right? Ignore the message entirely. So they equate to roughly the same behavior, but from a readability perspective, it's very clear to see and completely removes the doubt of was the date stored in the right format. That's another concern because you could have a UTC issue, right? You could have a second issue. You could have all sorts of time-based issues that would creep in and cause subtle bugs, whereas a version is um, I talk more than I listen. I find. Appreciate you being here today, Nast. So I know I'm not doing a lot of coding right now, but this is very worthwhile. because this design will impact the entire system. So here's what I'm thinking. Um, the common denominator on this side is a user, but I don't have a concept of a user. Tracking it on the user team updated doesn't make sense because that record is a set. So I really want to say, okay, this version, yeah, bother with it. Now remove anything that's not in the new version. And add anything that is. So I need a kind of route for this. So if you lock by date, how do you know there's an so my the word locking is what messes me up there, right? I get that it is kind of it's preventing an unnecessary update. Um, well, if you receive 8 and then 10, you know that 10 is greater than 8, therefore you can receive it, I suppose. If you need ordering, then I suppose that would be a yeah. Um, ultimately, this comes down to no, you don't roll back. You just decide. So again, ordering wise, if the ordering doesn't matter, then 9 comes in. You just ignore it. Um, so that's fine. I'm good for the discussion, Nest. It's useful for everyone to get the education here. I don't mind having the conversation in the chat. I get that I'm not doing the thing, but it's also useful for everyone to get their understanding in if they have the option. So in that case, if you got 10, you needed 9. I mean, in this case, I wouldn't, right? So if I got 8 and I'd added a team, so let's go back to my diagram, right? Let's say this was version 1, version 2. This is version 3, and this is where I currently am. And then I receive version 2 again, right? I was also reading at the same time, so it's all good. Um, because again, my brain when I see things like optimistic locking and I should know better than this because I've actually had this conversation with a colleague recently. They kind of explained what they were going to do in terms of optimistic locking on some data sets. Yeah. Um, um, so let's go to this. So I received Team A in event 1, in version 1. I received Team A and B in version 2. I received Team C in version 3. I then received, for whatever reason, it can happen, whatever reason caused it, I receive an event that says Team AB. Right? It could be that Kafka's lost its mind and republished the event. It could be it thought it didn't acknowledge it and it replays it for whatever reason. You get version 2 and say, no, I've already got version 3. I don't need this. Throw it out. Right? If you absolutely need the order to be intact, that's a whole different problem. I'm not even going to pretend to solve that until I have to. unless that scenario comes along. If you're doing the standard, like again, account opened, payment received, payment negated, account closed, etc., and you get, account closed, then you get payment received. What should you do? That's a case of what do you need to do for your system? I mean, if you got an account closed and you never received the account open, but you got a payment received, you might want to create a closed account and then take the payment and record it for the sake of clarity. And if you're receiving an account open, it doesn't mean anything to your account closed, right? So the versioning doesn't necessarily matter there, more the context of the event. In this case, I'm just receiving data because I'm using Kafka as data transfer. Or rather, you pass in version +1, and the version of the DB must be less than your version. Optimistic concurrency, he's not talking about optimistic concurrency, he's talking about optimistic locking, the concept. You're good. Let's not turn this into a battle. So when you serialize, you pass version +1 to the DB, that's the expected write. Yeah, we're not talking about. I suppose they do talk about optimistic locking in its database context a lot. So to Delta's point, one of the first articles that comes up is optimistic concurrency control, which does talk about transactions. But optimistic locking, described by the AI, does read as a more general concept. But they send you to the database pretty fast. Yeah. Let's do this. Let's do this. Gotcha. I find it fascinating the the amount we have to learn and the amount we have to, like, this here is exactly why I like teams, right? Because we all have different levels of experience and different levels of understanding of the same problems, but working together, we can align. Well, yeah. The problem with text-based discussion, though, is it can seem more uh, combative. So I'm trying not to read anything as combative, and yeah. Anyway, um, no, those aren't healthy. And I know I mean, I pretty much started this discussion on the back foot, right? And I had to readjust my own mindset. right? Because what I understood and what I use to describe is not the same thing. So I had to open my mind a little bit and think more about the problem and get past that. Parent swap. Morning, Trap. Hype time. Hi, where can I find .NET jobs for junior? LinkedIn didn't help that much from. I'm from Georgia, not a state actually. Junior .NET jobs. I mean, just look around the job sites that you have access to. You are, unfortunately, I have not typed into uh, any job sites recently, junior dev jobs. It's not something I'm sadly not looking for. So um, I assume your job market is tough. Um, and to be honest, um, I wouldn't necessarily look for junior as a title. I just look for .NET roles and look for them that have, a couple of years experience. Well, I wouldn't say going for senior jobs because that's just setting you could potentially set yourself up for failure. Junior dev jobs. um, but I would remove junior from your filter and just look for .NET roles. I have seen a few that are like 2 to 3 years experience without the title junior. Sadly, some of them with the title senior on them, but um, LinkedIn's actually the cleanest way to look at jobs recently. Um, those are the code bases that you don't want to work in years later, Dota. That's what happens. You get what you pay for. Um, Recruiters are the easiest way to get a job since they bypass all the ghost listing and hook you straight up with an interview with the company. If you can find some decent recruiters, yes. Um, yeah. How did that go? Did that go to? Yeah. Yeah, hype time. I mean, I'd be looking for .NET roles. Don't use the word junior in there. Just look for the experience and um um yeah, I still would associate as my title. 1,000 applications, most people not qualified, not even close. From my understanding, people scripting application, it was a mess. Oof. I'd apply to anything that asks for 3 years experience and maybe stuff that asks for five, depending. I mean, uh, apply for the jobs that seem interesting and and you feel like you could do, even if they're asking for a little bit more experience than you have. The worst that happens is you have an interview. You know, oh, we turn this conversation like quickly. So a senior role in Toronto with 14 other applications in like 7 days. Ugh, that term just feels bad. If you're not following Trap, by the way, I haven't managed to catch any of your streams recently, Trap. I don't know if you have been streaming much. I don't seem to get notifications anymore. Um, Trap does C++ development, develops libraries. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Uh, works on things like 3DO and builds libraries for 3DO development and retro computing. So highly worth a follow for when he does stream because it is a great time. Um, and again, you learn a lot. Uh, I had to sit there and code for hours with barely Googling and no AI like a wild man. Eh, I think we have to been working on my file system lately, but in random spurts of activity late at night before bed. I feel that. Yeah. Some of my most productive times are that. The local dev meetup was in AI tooling. I find pro AI talk triggering, but maybe I'll go and try and be open minded. I think it's a tool. It's a tool like anything else. Use it effectively and it will accelerate. It's like, you know, I can say this. People who use Vim, right? They normally uh praise it because it accelerates them. It's a fantastic tool. Once you get your head around it, people will prove like, look, I can move around quicker, I can do this, I'm quicker in it. It's a tool. I use a lot of resharper functionality from .NET from Visual Studio days, right? I'm using Rider because it's got refactoring tools. It's just another tool in the belt. I use AI. I don't. I use its suggestions and I turn them off when I don't like them. When it starts getting obtrusive, I turn them off. But I do use it. It is in there. It helps me with some things when I've typed a load of stuff. It knows what I'm going to type next. It helps me. It moves me along. Um, you got to validate it, but that's always the case. Shanhorn, good morning. Hope you are well. But yeah, learn to use the tools available to you, and it will help you. For things like this, like with the optimistic concurrency, optimistic locking. Um, you know, I could feed it that code and say, okay, what would you suggest, and see if I like it, right? Because it'll help me. I think better when I'm doing code, right? I'm not a big and anyone who's watched me for long enough knows this. Um, right. I do better when I'm seeing and I'm doing than I am. Um, sorry, with the mic away. Than I am talking about theoretical pieces. Um, it's going so sore from yard work all weekend. I should be sore from doing yard work all weekend, but it chose to rain and thunderstorm, so that got quickly nixed, and I got to play video games instead. I have a 12,000 guidelines file for my coding project for the AI that it never follows. Okay, I was not that unfortunate. I actually played Claire Obscure Expedition 33. I finally decided to put that in and get that played. I played a lot of Gran Turismo, did a lot of racing, got the VR headset out, um, and I played a lot of that. And then I decided to try Claire Obscure, and it's very good. Uh, did you play Expedition 33 on expert or game journalist mode? Are you a gamer? um, I play it on story mode, which is the one of the lowest, right? Um, Generally, my approach to games, because I don't get to play a lot of games normally, okay, is I play them on the easier setting to begin with, so that I can enjoy the game and get an idea for it, and then if I really enjoyed it, I'll play it back on a harder setting, just so that I can complete it. I don't like. I'm not um, like I'm never going to sit and play Dark Souls. I'm never going to sit and play games like that because it'll just frustrate me. So I don't see the point in frustrating myself and not playing a game. Maybe. Good afternoon. Welcome in. Hello, Raiders. How was your stream? Why are you taking the chance for me to raid you away? This is not fair. I tried Dark Souls briefly, the control system annoyed me. Yeah, yeah. Um, if you've not followed maybe before, maybe is developing an app called Barely Fit. It is a fitness tracking app, and it is coming along nicely, including lots of awesome artwork. If you like a nice chill place to hang out and watch someone be productive, then maybe stream is a fantastic place to be. I was worried you might, so I wanted to cut you off. Otherwise, you'd raid and then I'd end stream and then everyone's sad. Fairs. Fair, fair. Like the name, Barely Fit. You want to see the artwork as well? It's fantastic. Um, Not possible. Not possible. But anyway, we've got another 40 minutes of this stream left. So what we're talking about today. So if you've not been in here before, welcome in. I am right now trying to. We've been doing a bit of learning today, right? Been learning a little bit about my options for optimistic locking around basically idempotency on the receiving end of an event. So we're talking about if I get an event that has been seen previously, I don't want to change my data, right? Yeah. Well, I played Clair Obscur on the PS5. It's a nice looking game. I got about 3 or 4 hours in. It's an interesting storyline. But yeah. The mechanics, the battle mechanics, etc. So they're pretty interesting. The only game anyone should play is Dead by Daylight. You see, no one needs to hear me scream. No, that just wouldn't be pleasant. I am a giant wuss. I am a hide behind the couch when the Cybermen come on Doctor Who as a kid sort of wuss. So yeah, no Dead by Daylight for me. Not sure I still wouldn't hide behind the couch now, but we won't test that. Yes. So today we're doing Liquid Sky. This is so that tomorrow, which is my birthday, we land on 200 Liquid Sky streams. That's why we're doing Liquid Sky today, because it helped me align it. So yes. Yeah. So the fun. What I'm trying to figure out is what do I want to do? I do like the version idea. I think the version idea is the better option. which, as you pointed out, Nast is kind of the right version, the right way. It will read better than a date, 100%. So I'm not opposed to the idea. I'm just trying to figure out where do I put it without creating meaningless data structures. See, this is a pairing, right? So the version on here doesn't make sense because there's there's many to many. It doesn't make sense at the team level because the team does not change in this association. And it's only don't mean project. So my next option would be to assign a user or track a version of that. That's the publishing side of this, but that's a many to many. A version on that doesn't make much sense because then when I turn around and publish for the user, right? This has the user and then the team it's associated with. Unless I'm going to pivot my entire data design. So I need something to own the version so that I can put the version on this message, which then means on the other side, I can attach the version to the records or to the object. And then, yeah. So even this would be many to many. Unless I'm just not seeing the design right this second. So if you haven't seen it before, welcome in. This is the project I'm working on. This is Project Liquid Sky, as it's named. This is the current version running. The concept is that as a as a product team, you would be able to plan and organize your ideas and your requirements. And this is the actual version we're using right now to dog food this. You capture your requirements. Here's what I want to see. Here's, what I'm expecting from this. The teams one is the progress. No, did I not mark it as in progress? That's probably introduce teams. This one is in progress. Status in progress. Save. The concept is that you basically track, here's what I want, here's my requirements. Again, these requirements are written by me, so they're not going to be extremely lengthy. And then the developers can go and task those things out in technical ways and estimate that effort on those tasks, so that the total estimate of effort is attached to the requirements. What I'm working on right this second is this define user team in view. What we're discussing is maybe there is a need, or no, there is a need to deal with some sort of versioning, whether it be the date time or otherwise. but I'm trying to not create an unnecessary data structure here. A user team. Like if I create a user team, that's not. That doesn't make sense from from a readability perspective. Yeah. For reference, there is a real name for this project, by the way. I'm not sharing it publicly, but there is a real name. And once I've figured out the UI UX design, I will put that out there. No, I don't like the user team. That's not a meaningful object. Now, to have user in here, public ID, my birthday tomorrow. So this is stream 199 of Liquid Sky. So if I stream tomorrow, I get to stream episode 200 of Liquid Sky on my birthday. So yeah. That doesn't read any better. We need something to track the ID. But it doesn't feel. Something like that. So my problem with that, the problem with those objects is the meaning of them. I don't want to just store data for the sake of data. I need to make sure that it actually makes sense in terms of the workflow. Thank you. Yes. If I have. There's another design I've seen here, which kind of doesn't make sense, but it's not one I enjoy the idea of. So yeah, I suppose there could be a lot of them, couldn't there? You are right. I mean, at the very least, you went, but I should get out of the habit of putting int on everything. Uint's pretty big for version of that object. Yeah, 4.2 billion. Yeah, I don't think 18, that's a lot. I don't know what that number actually is. um, yeah, I need to get out of the habit of using ints and use more unsigned. Considering the systems I've worked in that have used the negative ability. Yeah. I have seen negated IDs to indicate soft delete, which I don't know if that's any better or worse than is deleted, but yeah, you can't just go with S64. You'll never run out. Yeah. Yes. You'll never run out. I got it. Um, I've seen. Uh, uh, dear. I don't want to do this. I don't want to create a versions table. It just feels wrong. But it doesn't have the object does not have this user team association is a many to many. So the version ID on there is not going to make any sense. Because they're going to get wiped out or removed or added or whatever. Ultimately, I just care about the current state once I've saved it. Nope, can't take it back. You've admitted it. U2 search. You are not perfect. Sorry. Um, wow. I didn't think this was going to take this direction today. Very little code. I thought I'd actually achieve this. So now we've discussed it enough, right? I'm not like laser focused on the solution because we've discussed it and that's kind of that. I agree with the general concept. Agree. I said that very strange then. I agree that the concept of the version does improve. Deletions we'll figure out later. Because again, deletion I can deal with as far as if I have to deal with soft delete, I can deal with soft delete later, right? I don't have to have that solution in place to handle this entire thing. Right now, I'm just moving the data forward. We haven't delete is not something even on this side, right? The concept of a delete actually doesn't exist deliberately because once it's gone past a certain phase, deleting it's not an option, right? And only the earliest of phases you can delete something because it's not actually been solved yet. Once it goes into any form of review, then it would actually be a request to delete or archive. So archiving or planning items is a is more a concept, but I don't want to introduce that until I've got solid search facilities in place because the view wouldn't actually wouldn't necessarily contain contain that. It could actually move to kind of a different area. So either way, delete as a concept isn't really something that I've really tackled yet. Not to say that I haven't wanted to. So I do agree that version ID or version, not version ID, is an improvement on that. In this case, it would be team version ID for the user. But even that, it doesn't necessarily sit 100%. Um, Thinking through the logistics. Yeah, you have to associate the version with a list of teams. Yeah. It's just where do I put that accurately? Like I can solve this now by just using a date. I whack a date on the user, team last updated or whatever, and solve it that way. I don't want to do it that way. After all this discussion, I think my eyes are opened enough to realize that the date solution is not necessarily the smartest. A version would also allow us to look at the one side of the data and see it's out of sync, right? We don't have to do any date calculation. We don't have to look at events. We can just look at the version stored in the source data and know that it's greater than the version we've got in the destination and resynchronize. Um, there's a whole lot of effort coming through ETL stuff later on because I am not using the event system to republish missing data. So how do I tackle this? How do I tackle this? Well, there's another problem with dates. There's always problems with dates. If you've done any amount of software development, you've probably hit a date issue at some point. What if two parallel requests are the same date value? You won't get a conflict. Uh, uh, the same date value. So two people go in and modify the same user at the same time and at different teams and publish that. That would be a really good problem to have right a second. The fact that the system would be that busy that two people will be modifying the same user. Do you lock out a date if it's equal or no? Yeah, is it less than or equal to? I would normally go with less than or equal to. So if I get the same message again, I would ignore it. Now, yeah, we would lose. If the data was published twice, I'd actually ignore it. I wouldn't update it. It wouldn't just be a less than. With versions, each one of them would have a different version. So, but you'd end up with a different problem there because version 8 might go out and version 9 might be the one that's more accurate. Yeah. You can only use date if the check is okay to be incorrect sometimes. No, I'm sold on the concept of version. I'm just trying to figure out how it fits into my system and what changes I need to make to because you can't guarantee sync clocks. True. And you know, I'm for the most part I'm in control of the occurred on event. Like I'm setting that to UTC now, so you don't have to set it when you create the event. Um, the server's publishing it, but again, if it's distributed, if there's the scaling, different machines, different clocks, different synchronization, I agree. Um, wow. The reason I'm pausing so much on this, by the way, is because whatever I do here is a pattern I want to repeat. It is a pattern I want to set as a standard in the code base. I am not looking to just hack this in. It has to solve the problem, and I have to be confident that it solves the problem. Not forever. I get that. I'm not trying to think through every eventuality here. I realize that I might need to adapt that, but at least if it's consistent, when it goes to change, it can change properly later, and consistently change properly later. Not rather than, oh well, here I did this way and there I use the date. I'm going to go and change this as it appears to other pieces. Version forces you to create a workflow that uses it. It is more involved, but you first need to answer the question: does a race condition matter? Um, yes. Um, for this particular event, it's highly unlikely to occur. Um, this is not the highest likelihood. If I have two people going in and modifying a planning item or modifying a task, that is highly likely, right? Um, yeah, don't worry about the possibility too much. I just record both and show the history to the user. Well, it's what the data currently shows. Yeah. And again, if I reset consumers, if Kafka replays a message, you are guaranteed at least once with Kafka, right? So I could get the same event twice, um, and not necessarily in the same order. Um, hey Sally, how you doing? But again, I'm not looking at this as a it solves my first problem, right? Um, now I'm looking at this as a what practice am I putting in place? Because I need something, right? I can't. It would be wrong of me to assume that every time I get a message is going to be correct, right? Because okay, let's take this as an example, right? I get user identifier and a bunch of team IDs. I go to the view side, right, and I implement the receiver or the user teams, and in the update, I wipe out what's there and replace it with what I get. This occurs, then my user's showing team A, team B, right? Because this event is actually the truth. The last event is the truth. Good morning, Mars. How are you? So, just from a um, well, this weekend, so I only sat at my computer for like an hour the whole weekend. Got to tear out the transmission of my daughter's Mustang and replace the clutch. Oh, nice. See, I'd see that as kind of a productive weekend. I'd love to be able to do that. Like, I'd love to understand how to do that. um, I watch far too many car videos. Um, I mean, I only sat at the computer for an hour though, the entire weekend, but that was mainly because I sat at the PlayStation playing games. Um, yeah, it's better if I had a lift. Yes. Yeah. My daughter drove for the first time this weekend, and Saturday was the first time I went out with her. It's amazing how easily you forget how intimidating a vehicle is. She's actually very confident while driving, which is nice. She's just a little bit overzealous on brake and not overzealous on accelerator. Went well overall. We just drove down to get some snacks. She did her 6 hours with the driving instructor. Um, she did 3 hours on Friday, 3 hours on Saturday. Um, and then he gave her the certificate, say, yeah, you good. I got her in the insurance, and then went out with her on Saturday. Well, they only do 6 hours. They do 6 hours with an instructor, and then it's up to the parents to get the other 50 hours required before they got to do 50 hours of driving between now and December. So, well, she has. Yeah, it's a very different system. Uh, yeah. Um, so we did that. So that was quite the challenge. Nice. I passed the I failed the written test in the UK for the first time. I passed the second time and then passed the driving test the first time. And I failed the written test in New Jersey the first time and then passed it the second time. But that's all they made me take. They didn't make me try and use a go-kart on real roads. They trusted that I could actually drive. What that means. You are a better driver than I am. Yes. I went to school in Kansas City suburb when I was learning to drive, and driving was taught in school. And as long as you passed with a C, you got your driver's license. Oh dear. You can always fall back on your career in sci-fi. Got to fall back. That's all I need. Oh dear. Okay. We this has been but I'm the best driver. What a stream. You accomplished nothing today. Mm, I disagree. I disagree. I accomplished learning. I accomplished enlightenment. I accomplished a perspective that I did not have previously. So thank you. I mean, had you not come along, there would have been a date on a user by now, and this would have been using that as idempotency, which should have still been valid. But now I get to reflect a bit more, right? That's that's accomplishment in my mind. And I made maybe smile, which is also a greater. Why don't users have dates? It's not the user that's the problem. The user has a date. I can check the last updated of the user. It's the team associated, so the team records associated um, with the user. Um, that's how you get the dollars. I am thankful I have never had to use an app. I've been married for 20 years, so I'm good there. um, don't, no, 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 not in this chat. Don't even pull anything like that into this chat. No, 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 no. um, I don't want to do what I've seen in the past. Okay, let me go with where I'm thinking right this second. Right now, I'm contemplating what does it mean to have a per event versioning, right? Because the versioning only matters at the time I publish the event, right? It doesn't the system tracking it. Um, okay, let me. If I have to create a table with a column for every single one of these, it's going to be messy. It's going to make the code unreadable, and it's going to be an easily forgotten field. Right? We're going to forget version. It's not going to be avoidable. If I put a version as part of the headers of Kafka and build the concept of versioning in at that level, then I can track event versions at the library level. And when I go to publish a new version, I'm publishing it. It therefore is an increment of the version. Whether it's right or not is not my concern. I don't have to track that in the code. And there's a global solution. It's part of the domain of the repositories. It's part of the messaging. So I'm kind of torn there. It's a technical implementation to prevent me re-implementing, consuming a message. It's ignored as part of the data, right? These similar with my backups, they have a version. So as the DB moves forward, there's a standard for each version. Yeah. So how do I tackle this? What is the right path here? I'm not entirely sure. Um, I don't like the introduction of a user object in here, and I don't like the idea of a versions object appearing here. Versions would be messy, and again, it's only the time I publish the integration event that I care about the version. It's not a concept within the entity. Right, I'd be introducing an entity user, right, for tracking the team, and the user here doesn't have a version. The user team has a version, and it would obscure the fact that I'm tracking that version for the user team. So I don't want to introduce user. It doesn't belong on a team because the team doesn't own this data. This is an association of a user with a team. At this level, the organization management level, is only a user identifier. It's not a user, right? So I'm trying to figure that out. So although I see the point that it is a part of the domain of the repositories, it's more about the messaging than it is about the domain. So introducing it into the actual domain makes that messier. realistically, it only matters when I go to publish the thing that I have a version of that thing that I'm publishing. And that will always be true, right? This system is saying this event is being published. Now, yeah, I'll have to reflect on that one a little bit more. As always, if you are new to the stream, if you have any questions, thoughts, opinions, you're more than welcome to share. There is a Discord linked in the cards below that you're more than welcome to join. I'm happy to continue conversations off of stream. And sometimes throughout the day, I do hang out in the voice chat, but mainly in the evenings, we do hang out there quite frequently and continue some of these conversations. Sometimes it's just general chat, though. Warning. Okay. Well, that being said, I have some thinking to do. I have some thinking about how I want to tackle this, whether anything will work. I do agree with the version. I've just got to figure out how I want to implement that. I don't like the idea of creating an object just for the sake of creating an object. And I don't like the idea of introducing something that is basically tracking a messaging concept across the system. So I just got to go through some use cases, figure some things out, and figure out what I'm saying. But there is no entity here. That's the problem. I've got to create something to track it. So anyway, as always, OneLine has been here supporting me, doing shout outs. Thank you, OneLine, as always. Appreciate you. And he made me smile. I did not mean to. Why did I pin that? Unpin this message. I do not need to pin. He made me smile. Ads will run shortly. But anyway, OneLine supports me greatly. He gives me the shout outs, shouts out people who come into the stream, and I am very bad at that because when I'm focused on stuff, it's very hard to kind of divert my brain. So I truly appreciate you, OneLine, as always. And if you like .NET content and Blazor and other things, OneLine stream is an excellent place to go hang out. But anyway, we are going to raid. We're going to raid fullbots. We missed fullbots last week because we raided maybe several times last week. I do like to raid application developers. So if you know of any really great app devs streaming at this time, that would be awesome. Not that I don't appreciate the game devs. Fullbots develops an awesome game called Blockshop that I'd highly recommend checking out. But anyway, let's go see Fullbots. I'll be back tomorrow for episode 200 of Liquid Sky, and I will see you then. Thanks all. Bye.